Thank you very much. In the spirit of the title of this session, Unconventional Wisdom, I'm going to deliver what I think may be the first analog monomedia session. So the next 25 minutes will be a PowerPoint-free zone. I live in London, and when I first said to my friends and colleagues down there that I was coming up to this conference, they all said the same thing to me. They said, "Oh, you're going to love Newcastle. You're going to love it up there. The Geordies, they're so slow." But I'm not sure if that's true, because the first afternoon I arrived here, I went for a walk in the center of town, and I stepped off the curb, and I almost got run over by a yummy mummy in a people carrier with a child strapped in the back seat, taking a corner on two wheels, yakking on her mobile phone. And if there is a more vivid metaphor for the speedaholic modern life, I can't think of it. And the fact that she was on her phone reminds me of another case that hit the headlines a little while ago here in England. And it was a couple who went to the divorce courts, and the judge said to them, what happened? Why are you here? And it was the husband who spoke first. He said, "Your Honor, you know, it's a long story. We married very young, and we grew apart over the years. But the moment that I knew this marriage was over, that it was dead in the water, was when I was in bed with my wife. We were in an intimate moment together, and I began to get lockjaw, you know, in that moment when you're doing that special trick. And I lifted my head up to stretch my neck, and I caught her checking her email on the BlackBerry." And this is for real. Now, it seems to me that there are three conclusions that you can draw from a vignette like that. The first is that the husband in question really needs to brush up on his technique. The second is the conclusion drawn by my very chic Parisian neighbor in London, and she said to me, "Well, of course, this is just more proof that the English do not know how to make love." and that may be true, and that may be a subject for another conference, or even for maybe Helen Fisher. The third conclusion, I think, is the most apposite one, and that's the one I'm most interested in exploring today. And that is that collectively, we have forgotten how to unplug, how to switch off. We've forgotten how Ian Neal said yesterday, how to do one thing at a time. We've forgotten how to give ourselves over completely to another person, to the moment. We've forgotten how to slow down. And it's not that surprising, is it? Because this is the world we live in now, a world stuck in fast forward, a world obsessed with speed, with cramming more and more into less and less time. For many of us, every day feels like a race against the clock, a dash to a finish line that we never, ever seem to reach. Speed has become our universal default option. The assumption is that faster is always better. So just look at how we try to make things better. What do? We speed them up, don't we? So we used to read, now we speed read. We used to dial, now we speed dial. We used to walk, now we speed walk. And we used to date, and now we even speed date. And even things that are by their very nature slow, that are designed to shift us into a lower gear, what do we do with them? Well, we try and speed them up too, don't we? So there's a gym near my house in London which has an evening course in speed yoga. Now this is for time-starved professionals who want to salute the sun, and they want to bend their bodies into the lotus position, but they want to do it in 20 minutes instead of a whole hour. And I thought speed yoga was the most absurd manifestation of this roadrunner culture, until a friend of mine in the United States got invited to a drive-through funeral. And this is for real, and it does exactly what it says on the packet. The church places the coffin at the entrance in the driveway. People pull out of traffic, roll down a window, toss a flower, say farewell, and then drive off again. It's like getting a Big Mac in a drive-through McDonald's. You know? And invariably, there's always some guy behind you, you know, revving his motor. And a college student did a research project and discovered that the average time that people spend beside the coffin at one of these drive-through funerals is 90 seconds. Now, think about that for a moment. 90 seconds to say farewell to a loved one. Now, things like speed yoga and drive-through funerals are obviously extreme examples of this go faster, speedaholic culture, and they're good to raise a laugh or two, but they also direct us towards a more serious point, and that is that these days we are so caught up in the headlong dash of daily life, we're so marinated in this culture, this cult even, of speed, that we often lose sight of the damage that it does to every aspect of our lives, the toll that all of this running around, all of this busyness, this stimulation, this distraction takes on every walk of life, on our diet and health, on the quality of our work, on our relationships and communities, and on the environment. We are racing through our lives rather than actually living them. And often, when we get stuck in that roadrunner mode, it takes a shock to the system, a wake-up call to make us realize that all of this speed is doing us harm. And that takes many forms. For some people nowadays, it's an illness. One day, the body just says, I can't take it anymore. And the person suffers a burnout. Or you wake up in the morning and you just can't get out of bed. It's a bit like that image we saw yesterday of the gazelle zipping across the savannah and then suddenly crashing into the tree. Or maybe your relationship goes up in smoke because you haven't had the time or the tranquility to listen to the other person, to be with them, to switch off your BlackBerry in the bedroom. Now, my wake-up call came when I started reading bedtime stories to my son. And I used to go into his room at the end of the day, and I just could not slow down. It wasn't like there was anything waiting for me in the evening. I just could not slow down. So I'd be sitting there on the bed with one foot on the floor, speed reading Snow White. Trying, and if there's a parent in the room, he will recognize this scenario, trying to skip a line or a paragraph, sometimes even a whole page. And it doesn't work, does it? Because, my 4-year-old knew the stories inside out. So he was always catching me out. He'd say, why are there only 3 dwarves in the story? What happened to Grumpy? And what should have been the most relaxed, the most intimate, the most tender, the most magical moment of the day when a dad sits down to read a story to his little boy became instead a battle of wills, a war between my speed and his slowness. And this went on for some time until I caught myself speed reading a newspaper article with time-saving tips for fast people like me to go even faster. And one of those tips talked about a series of books called The 1-Minute Bedtime Story. Snow White in 60 seconds. And I could smile about that now, but my first reaction when I read those words was, hallelujah. I must get the whole set FedEx to me tomorrow morning from Amazon. But thankfully, my next reaction was very different. It was like being in a cartoon when the light bulb goes on over your head, and I suddenly thought, whoa, has it really come to this? Am I really in such a hurry that I'm prepared to fob off my son with a soundbite at the end of the day? And I knew then that I'd lost my bearings and that I needed to slow down. And I went around the world, investigated, and ended up writing my book. And what I discovered along the way was that wherever you go nowadays, more and more people are doing the unthinkable. They're slowing down in every walk of life. And they're discovering that contrary to what conventional wisdom tells us, which is that if you slow down, you're boring, you're unproductive, you're roadkill, they find that the opposite is true, that by slowing down judiciously at the right moments, that they work better, they play better, they live better. And in this rising tide of deceleration that you see around the world now lie the seeds of what many people now refer to as the international slow movement. Now, if you'll permit me a small act of hypocrisy, I'd like to take you on a fast tour of the slow movement. We are on a deadline, after all. Just to give you an idea of some of the things that are going on, and then there's some Q&A, and I'm around, and we can talk further about what else is happening. But I just want to give you a kind of brushstroke overview of the culture quake that's happening below the surface. So let's think about food. We eat badly now because every link in the food chain has been infected by this virus of hurry. So much of what arrives on our plate has been produced on high-speed, high-turnover farms, industrial farms. By the time it reaches us, it hardly tastes of anything. The way we cook, whop it in the microwave. The way we eat. So often we eat while doing something else. You're driving down the street, or you're balancing it on your lap on the sofa in front of the apprentice, or you're surfing the internet. There's a phrase I heard recently which really sums up how, especially in the workplace, how food has become something that just kind of happens while we're doing something else. And the phrase is dining al desco. Ring a bell? So that's why there's a very profound rethink around this idea of food and why slowing down with it is good. The slow food movement, which began in Italy but has spread right across the world, including to here in the UK, is all about cultivating, cooking, and consuming food at a more reasonable pace so that we get more health and nutrition from it, more social connection, sitting around the table breaking bread with people, more pleasure and joy, and a better deal for Mother Nature as well. But slow food is just the tip of a very big iceberg. The renaissance of the farmer's market. Is a sign, I think, that people are yearning for food that's fresh and seasonal and has a link to the seasons. Food that's connected to a real person. Food that has a story behind it and isn't just a product wrapped in plastic on a supermarket shelf.